spoiler alert for Blonde. Hey everybody, Fiona here, and welcome to the new podcast series here at the Script Department, Stepping into Frame, Women in Screenwriting. Before we talk more about that, don't forget to like, share, or subscribe to the Script Department podcasts. You can find them on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also pop over to the Script Department website at scriptdepartment.net and check out what our global network of screenwriters have been doing. You can even buy us a coffee. So the Women in Screenwriting podcast is going to do a few different things. We'll be reviewing films written by women. We'll be interviewing screenwriters and talking about books about screenwriting. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm one of those big nerds who is a writer who likes to read about writing. So today you'll see I am joined by Eva. Hi, Eva.
Hi.
John. Hi,
Hello.
John. And Jenny.
Hi.
Hi. We've got a big gang here today. Normally we have kind of smaller groups, but we've got quite a big group chatting today about the Blonde movie. What do you call what's a collective noun for a group of screenwriters? Anyone know? Is there a collective noun for a group of screenwriters?
A murder of screenwriters.
A murder?
That sounds very.
That's not bad.
It sounds Hitchcock, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. What about a pitch of screenwriters?
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Or a beat. What about a beat of screenwriters? Maybe.
I like pitch. A pitch of screenwriters.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that's a good one.
Pitch. So that's what we have today. A pitch of screenwriters.
Can we rename the podcast to this? Because this sounds like a better name for a podcast.
Yeah, I like it. A pitch of screenwriters. That's not bad. I like it. So today we are going to talk about what has turned out to be kind of highly controversial or increasingly controversial new film from writer-director Andrew Dominik. So Blonde is based on a book by Joyce Carol Oates on the same name. It's like sort of tome. It's like 700, 800 page book. Award-winning book, regarded as a sensory masterpiece from Norma Jean's point of view, but a bit like a slasher film. So kind of interesting. So I wanted to start talking about the film today with you guys, asking a question. And I did a little bit of research before today about how many movies there have been about Marilyn Monroe, and there have been about 13 or 14 biopics or documentaries about her life. So question to you guys, do we need another Marilyn Monroe film? And if we do, is this the one we need to discuss? What do you think? John, what are your thoughts?
I think there's always going to be some updated perspective on the tragic nature of her life, particularly in relation to the industry and the way the industry chewed her up and spat her out, particularly post Me Too. There's definitely another there is an opportunity to question how much of those moments we mythologize about Marilyn Monroe are that we should be mythologizing. You know, there are moments that may not actually, analyzing it under a new lens might not actually be appropriate to celebrate anymore, given the context of which that particular moment might have taken place in. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Marilyn Monroe, but I do think Post Me Too does open up, or at least I guess encourage maybe another revisit of people like her who have been victimized by the industry. That was one of the biggest stories that came out of Me Too, was the way the film industry in particular was victimizing people. And I think Marilyn Monroe would have been a very interesting case study in that conversation in the past. You know, what we call the golden age of cinema. We do mythologize in a very in a glorious way, you know, and actually a lot of people were hurt by that period. So I think there is, I think there is room for it if it's doing something perhaps a little different. I don't know if this is the definitive Marilyn Monroe film, though. That's my only thing.
I would love to see another Marilyn Monroe film completely shot from her perspective. So you get to see how people react to her and the way that she works, but completely from her point of view, so that we're not objectifying her anymore. But unfortunately, I don't think that will ever happen, because I think we are fascinated with her and by her. I think I love a bit of Marilyn Monroe. I think this film is actually not about Marilyn Monroe as such. I feel like this film is about Norma Jean, or a reimagined version of her, and it's got some really interesting points, and I think it's really beautifully shot. But it is incredibly troubling, and I'm not 100% sure that it ticks all the boxes that I would like to see.
Yeah, gotcha. It doesn't sound like, did you not love it?
I did love it. I did love the film in a really, I think it's a brilliant film. I think it was really hard to watch, and I did have to watch a little bit of comedy after it finished. So I stayed up quite late that night. But I did love it, and I think there's some really, really interesting points that it was trying to make. There's a lot of good motifs in there. The circle of light, and the continued return to the circle as a kind of shape, and her kind of cyclical, kind of self-destructive kind of nature, there's lots of points in it. Absolutely terrifying at the end when she's turning up to I can't even remember what it was, the Oscar ceremony or something like that, and the people that are all standing shouting her name, but it's not like they're shouting to her in a nice way. They're shouting, they're absolutely screaming, and then when their faces all get distorted, I thought that was amazing, the way that was done.
Yeah, it was very strong, wasn't it? It was a very powerful image, I think.
Yeah.
Eva, what did you think?
I think that image would have been a lot more powerful if the rest of the film had been slightly different. But on the first point that you were saying about, can anyone really write it without objectifying her? Yeah, totally. I think any decent screenwriter could, and especially if they were female, because they'd be writing a character from the point of view of someone who had been through at least some of the stuff that the character was going through. And I really think that is where it failed. But I think now was a good time for a Marilyn Monroe film. And I think we did need a new one, because the amazing things they were able to do with the imagery, like the actress was amazing. They were able to make it look so real. And that was both its best point and its worst point, because it looked so amazing and so real. And that is what we needed. But then the script and the character and the portrayals of everyone were just so not what we needed, especially in a post-Me Too society. It was kind of the clash of the two together that made me hate it so much, because I really wanted the imagery. I wanted a new Marilyn film that I could kind of look up to and be inspired by. And it had all of the images without any of the substance or good writing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I agree with you too. I didn't have a great time in this movie. I thought it was cinematically really interesting, but I felt there was a real missed opportunity from a story point of view. And it's really interesting about is it the right time? It just felt to me, and I'd be really keen to hear what you guys think. I felt that it was a story about, it was nothing new for me. I know that she was objectified. I totally understand that. I totally know I understand how terribly she was treated by all of those people in the industry and the media. So there was nothing new for me in terms of what I understood about Marilyn's experience. But all I felt like was that it was, here's how bad it was for her by being bludgeoned by it again. It was like being hit over the head by how terrible it was. So it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel terrible, but I already knew. So I was desperate for, well, what else? And I think you're right, Jenny, about the, and Eva, about the, Marilyn's point of view. Like, give us Norma Jean's, what does she see, rather than here's more people showing what everyone else sees, kind of thing, was my take. I don't know what you guys thought around that.
I thought as well, it was a shame, with a reimagining, they could have reimagined it. Like it just felt like reimagining. It was like they reimagined her life as if everyone in the world was evil.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the
Yeah, I
absolute
thought-
worst way we could have imagined her life to have been? And they reimagined her character as so much weaker than I think that the true Marilyn would have been. There's no way she would have risen to fame in the way she did and been such an amazing actress if she had let the things that happened in her life, A, define her, or B, break her down in the way that they did in this film.
Yeah,
I
and
was talking with a friend of mine. We were saying that if Elvis had come back and seen the movie they made about him, he'd probably laugh through parts of it. He'd probably go, "Wow, you nailed that part," or "Is that how people? Wow, okay," like I think he would have been, he would have been maybe flattered a little bit, even if he was also blown away by what is this new form of cinema. And I think if you were to show this film to Marilyn Monroe, she'd probably be upset that that's all. She'd probably think, "Is that all people think of me? Is that all that people have to say?" Yeah, exactly. Yeah, is that all
that people? Furious about
is that all?
it.
And I think there's so much more, as you say, Eva, to this woman who yes, was a product of great branding and marketing on the part of a studio, but the studios weren't that great at, the star had to bring their game to the table as well. And I feel it does nothing. This film does nothing to speak to the comedic qualities of this woman, her musical qualities, or any other skills that she brought to the table. Even the scene in the film where she is singing, she is just lip syncing, because we didn't even get to see her sing. They recorded previous because that's how they would have filmed it, but we don't even get to see her be a skillful person or get validated in any way as a skillful person. And that is not true,
They literally made it seem like she got her job and everything that came with her career from having sex with men.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like that just puts feminism back about 100 years.
There was that
and she's assaulted, obviously, at the beginning, which is horrific. But it does feel like, everything was just from that scene. Everything was just catapulted out, her career was catapulted from that. And it's, again, as you say, sorry, Jenny.
That's okay. I was just going to say, there was that one bit, wasn't there, when she was talking to Arthur Miller, and he was surprised at how there's like the odd little thing that they do, but he was surprised at how insightful she was, and that he'd read her plays and stuff. But to me, that didn't fully expand on how intelligent she was and how switched on she was to, wanting to be an actress and things, because that just led on to him then falling in love with her. And and there wasn't really much there to kind of, hang your hat on.
I think Arthur Miller would have been quite upset with his depiction as well, to be honest.
Yeah. There's a very ugly moment there where right before when she is giving him those notes in that scene, and he is, Adrian Brody plays it brilliantly, but he is livid by the fact that she has anything to say about his play. "Oh, really? You've got notes, I see. Okay." And it's very, oh God, another person, is now turning on her.
And he was the good guy, right? Of all of the bad, he was like the best of the bad bunch, right? So even he had his moment. But it was interesting because she appeared to be very linear. I thought she was presented in a very linear way. She had no agency whatsoever, I felt, as a character. And actually, if you pull that back to the screenwriting sort of structurally, it actually meant, if you think about her character arc, there kind of was none. It was like victimized, abused, victimized, abused, victimized, abused. There was no real light and shade. There was no real there was no journey. It was just from one terrible experience to another. So that was really hard for us for me, definitely over a 3-hour film, to engage with a character that was really linear.
And she was just bounced, wasn't she, from one thing to the next to the next.
The entire story, it was just led by all the different men in her life. It started with her mum's mistake, and then, you've got it being led by her different films and what days they came out. And then the rest of it is just how the different men treated her. Every time the story gets moved on, none of it is her own agency.
I thought there was a really interesting bit. I did a little bit of research on Marilyn afterwards, because I was like, is that bit real? I always get really confused. It's like when I watch The Crown, I always get a bit like, was that real? Was that not real? So I researched about her abortions, and there's no actual record that she had any abortions at all, apart from she suffered from endometriosis. And I thought that would have been interesting. That would have been amazing to put that in there from a female and a feminist point of view. Get that stuff out there, you know. She had several miscarriages, and she had to end what's it called when you get pregnant but it's in the tube?
Oh,
Ectopic pregnancy. Yeah, she had to end an ectopic pregnancy when she was with Arthur Miller, I think. Don't quote me on that, but that's from my little bit of research. And I just thought there was one moment in the film quite early on when she's on the phone to somebody and she's saying something. She sounds a bit like freaked out about something, and he says, "What's the matter? Are you on your period? Are you taking painkillers?" And I thought that's like a tiny little hint of how much in pain she was, and how that could have been, like, you know, explored a little bit further, rather than those weird like fetus scenes, which I absolutely
fully grown fetus as well.
hated
It's like
those.
she never, in none of the storyline was the baby at the point where it would have been in like what they
I
showed.
didn't know why they did that. I did like the film, but I had
It felt
no
very
idea.
anti-abortion.
Yeah,
Every person I talked to about this film says the fetus scenes. Everyone brings it up that I've spoken to and that I've seen reviews online and stuff like that. It is mind-boggling how that made its way into the film.
It's got such a subtext of anti-abortion. It's ridiculous. Like,
but also from a feminist film, right? And we'll get onto this because Dominic says this is a feminist film. The shot where it's the view out of Marilyn Monroe's cervix, I was like, hang on a second, people. Like there is nothing feminist about that. It almost felt like it was almost grotesque around, you think you've seen everything of Marilyn. Well, here, you can be inside a cervix as well. You can see what that looks like. It was kind of like, really? Like, what was that adding to the story at all? And along with the whole fetus thing and the talking fetus, I really struggled to understand how that was added to the story, move the story along. I mean, maybe you could say, okay, it showed the little control that Marilyn had on her own body, but we know that, right? Like there was nothing new in that. So it just felt gratuitous to me, all of that.
For a movie that prides itself on some of its more abstract and subtle kind of ideas, it is so unsubtle at times. And so just polar opposite, right in your face, no attempt to mask what it's trying to say or do it in an imaginative way or a cinematic way or anything like that. It's very, very strange to have those kind of scenes.
Yeah, did any of you guys feel get the feminist vibe in it? Was there anything you picked up that was other than the fact that, okay, he quite clearly presented that all male figures in her life were pretty terrible and showed a sort of perhaps a terrible reimagining of what JFK was really like, because that was a pretty difficult scene. That was what I could grab around. Okay, well, maybe he's showing the men for their truth, if you like, but I struggled to anything else. I know, did you guys?
The women were horrible too, though, weren't they?
Everybody was, yeah.
Like the women every character was horrible. So you could say, oh yeah, it's feminist because it shows how horrible the men are to her, but everyone was just horrible to her.
And also,
there was not a single.
That's a really simplistic view of feminism, isn't it? Feminism is not all men are horrible, all women are great. Like it's like, this is, an evening up. We want to like level up. We want to, put our point of view forward, and it's not done. It's just not done. It isn't feminist. I think, if anything, I think yes, it's really it's explicitly making you question what you're watching when you're watching Marilyn Monroe films. I really, I felt when I was watching, I love Some Like It Hot, and I love the other one that I've forgotten the name of now.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
We'll come back.
But anyway, yeah. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're watching that, it's linked in with the storyline that you're watching, all this stuff happening in the background, and we know that she was treated badly, and we know, like John said at the beginning, the star system was just horrible for people, for stars. It trapped them into that contract system and everything. But I suppose making explicitly clear just how intensely objectified she was, but by objectifying her and the voyeurism of watching her, and like you said, like being inside her cervix, and I don't know, I just don't think I think there were some really beautiful bits of that film. I was quite blown away by it, but I really don't think it's hit the feminist note, and all, yeah, just so awful. All the people were just so awful. You just think, and it was almost Oedipal, wasn't it? Not in its kind of like, well, in some ways, like she was calling all her like husband's daddy and stuff. So it was in that way as well. But the absolute tragedy of it, you can see it all coming. You've got the dramatic irony there. The audience knows what's happening. Bad stuff. And yes, she's a tragic character, and that film is a tragedy. But it's just, it's not. I think because she's, Marilyn Monroe, people think they know Marilyn Monroe, and her backstory is quite well known. But I think, yes, like Eva said earlier, the reality, the realism, should I say, of the film, that, some people won't go away and do that research. Some people will just have that image of her in their heads, and I don't think that's fair. I don't.
Well, it's funny, you said you call it a tragedy, but I think tragedy requires, in cinema terms, I think requires agency in your character to make decisions that lead to tragic. You want your character to almost be a flawed character that has a chance to right the wrong or do the right thing or whatever, and she makes a mistake because they go back in their old ways. That's a simplistic approach to tragedy, but it requires some sort of agency on the part of a protagonist. I think what we got really is just bullying. Basically, it's just a character being bullied and abused, and tragic. It's a horror in that sense, because horror is out of the control of the victim. A lot of the time, I think, and so it was just I saw it as horror. I saw it more like a zombie movie, like a Groundhog Day zombie movie, where it's this person just being attacked by everybody, no matter what corner she turns, and she will wake up the next day and relive it all over again. And it's just, no matter what happens, she will be bounced back into it again. Oh, she's dead now. She'll be back up again next day, and she will just repeat this. Not literally dead, but you know what I mean. Like, and it's just this constant recycling of trauma every single time with new players and a new scenario. But it's almost like a sick social experiment.
No, I agree. I actually agree. Yeah, she hasn't got that. She's not making those decisions. Yeah, you're right. And the other thing that I found really confusing was that she was so happy with Charlie Chaplin Jr. and the other junior, the two juniors, and then she had the abortion, and that's it. You didn't see them again. Like, you didn't see what happened to that relationship. And I know they've got a lot of like ground to cover, but that's not.
Well, they did spend like 10 minutes on their sex scenes. Yeah. So, I mean, they could have covered the ground a different way. So, oh no, let's have some more gratuitous threesomes.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I found a bit frustrating about this was that there are so many interesting moments in her life that I was really excited to kind of get a sense of, or get maybe another perspective on, or I'd heard that there was the relationship with Kennedy was going to be explored. I did not expect the way it was explored in this movie, and I was thinking maybe they'll do the birthday cake thing, and we'll see like how that's pitched to her. For example, what do you want me to jump out of a birthday cake? Really, like I was just imagining something like maybe there'll be some reference to that, or maybe them meeting for the first time. There's the moment where she keeps saying, "Oh, there's somebody in your hotel room waiting for you." And she keeps thinking it's her father, and I assume it's probably Kennedy, is it? And my timeline was all messed up at that point as I'm watching it, but I just thought maybe that's him. And I was very curious to see how they'd depict that. I was horrified by the way they depicted it. Really horrific and really uncomfortable. And
yeah.
And that was it. I knew I was never going to watch that film again after that scene. But I was annoyed that. Yeah, you had this whole tapestry of moments to show us of Marilyn Monroe's life from different perspectives, or maybe an angle that we hadn't seen before, and you chose to do the rape, or you chose to do the constant victimization, the constant abuse, and it felt like you'd made your point. Okay, you've made the point again, and it's like, it's a film that wants us to be that. Assumes we're intelligent enough to follow the kind of more abstract moments of the film, but doesn't treat us with any intelligence or respect, in the sense that, yeah, we get it. We got it 2 hours ago. We got it, as you said, Eva.
It was like porn, wasn't it? It was like pornography for pain lovers, like, let's just watch it over and over again. This poor woman get just
when they had the Joe DiMaggio beating her up scene. They didn't show, I mean, obviously I didn't want to see him beating her up, but they thought it was okay to show the rape and all of that stuff and the sex, but not the violence, if you know what I mean. And obviously there was, some sexual violence there as well, but
yeah,
I don't know.
It's funny, isn't it? It was like showing the sensationalized, not the brutality bit, like not the not the male-driven brutality, but the sensationalized sexualization of the woman kind of thing. Again,
yeah, not the bit that they're going to feel bad about, like, men being violent, that's outrageous, but men raping women, that's fine. We can show that a bunch of times because at least you get to see her boobs.
There was a lot of breast flashing, wasn't there? And again, not that I have any issue with that per se, but I just felt, again, from the feminist perspective of feminist film, I thought, why is it that we keep seeing this over and over? It was sort of this. It was almost like a technique, if you like. It just kept coming up and coming up. And even that shot where the famous shot where she's over the subway grate and her dress comes up and it's the iconic photo and whatever.
Yeah.
And even that, like, it kind of lingered on that scene for ages and just went round and round. I thought, why are we lingering on this?
Yeah.
Again, we know this so well. It was almost like there was, and I get that they zoomed in on the photographers at the back and they had the grotesque faces, and that was really powerful. But it was like, do we really need to be, going around and around this woman for like a minute just watching this thing? It was really hard to,
I reckon you could edit that film down to 40 minutes and we'd still understand the story and get the best bits. And also, my biggest issue with, and it's not even a feminist issue, it's a storyline issue. Why at the beginning, when her mum decided to drown her, did she take her top off first and get her boobs out? It's like, oh, I'm completely mental, I'm going to kill my kid. Oh, but let's make sure my boobs are out first because I've got a good pair. Like, what? Seriously. And then she gets her boobs out again later on. Marilyn gets her boobs out when she's washing. It's like everyone's just like, oh, well, before we do something really important, let's make sure our boobs are out.
Yeah. We didn't see the equal amount of nakedness from men, I noticed.
No, but there's enough sex scenes in the film that there was no shortage of opportunity.
Yes, this is true.
And but it's a very one-sided view, and I don't understand. I'm not saying that a man can't write. I'm not saying a man can't write strong female characters. Men should be able to write strong female characters. Shame on you if you can't. But it's it's the idea that you're doing a film like this and you're not going to have a female screenwriter in this. I mean, fine, if Andrew Dominic wants to be the auteur, and he is an auteur filmmaker, you could have a co-writer. Many people do, you know.
It'd be a lot better if he had.
But I don't know. I think I'm a fan of Andrew Dominic, but there is an arrogance in thinking you've got this with such a complex character.
There was no, and in that at the credits at the end, you know, that all the there might have been one female producer or something, I can't quite remember, but all of the main kind of like the editor and all of that, aren't they all male?
Yeah, so everybody that would have had a production or some sort of creative role in the depiction of Marilyn Monroe in this film, was a male voice.
And do you know what?
Sorry,
do you know what shows that more than any other scene? What shows the obviousness that there weren't any creative female voices? When she has a miscarriage, she starts bleeding from her belly button. You would not just randomly fall over, lose your baby, and start bleeding out of your belly button. You just wouldn't.
There was all sorts of random things, like the fetus that was supposed to be very small, like almost like a fully grown fetus. Like the timing of all of that was, and I don't know whether that was an artistic decision, but it really struck you as he either hasn't looked into it or doesn't know, or it's an artistic decision, but it didn't quite land as an artistic decision either. It wasn't quite clear enough. I don't think
that's
made me think
that's why it made it feel like it was very anti-abortion, like Eva said earlier, because you know I'm not, you know, I've never been in that situation where I've had to choose anything like that, but you know, when it's it's a few weeks old or whatever, it's a tiny little collection of cells, you know, it's not
they wouldn't abort it when it was like that. They just wouldn't do it. Like, even, you know, it would actually hurt the mother. There's so much scientifically wrong stuff in it, and so much content that was just definitely not run past a woman.
But he would probably get away with that by saying, or he would probably say to that, well, it's not supposed to be real. It's supposed to be an imagining. So, you know, probably that's where his headspace is at. And I guess in the on the side of balance, Jenny, there were things you did like about it. Tell us what you did like about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't remember now, to be honest with you. I'm gonna just have to look back at my notes.
I appreciated that. Like, I appreciated the small moments where they were trying to portray her anxieties, or, you know, the ways that she was dealing with the horrific things that had happened to her. But the moments where we saw her be strong in those dealings with were so much more powerful than the moments that we saw her be weak. And I felt that a really big issue, as you were saying earlier, you know, she suffered from I'm never going to be able to pronounce it.
Endometriosis.
Endometriosis. And again, I know people who suffer from it. And when you have something like that happen to you in your life, and then it's portrayed in such a weak way, it feels quite offensive to anyone suffering from that.
You know, the scene that annoyed me the most, it was the I mean, there were scenes that angered me, there were scenes that disgusted me, there were scenes that made me think, that's it, I'm done, I don't want to watch this anymore, but I have to because there's a podcast episode that we have to do. Thanks, guys. But there was a moment where she's cutting. There's a beautiful, like, I think like it's the time she spends with Arthur Miller out by the sea, and it's kind of montagey, and is that a word? And the music kind of picks up for a while. There hasn't been music for a long time, and it's noticeably like it's color, and it's her running around the garden, and it's like I was like feeling, wow, there's this sense of emotion washing over me right now, and I don't know why. And then I realized it's because it's been so dark for so long, and now finally there's this moment she's happy and she's found somebody, and wow, good for her, and all that. And then she's cutting these branches, cutting the roses, and she's, I think, talking to her unborn child and all that kind of stuff. And there's just, and I was like, okay, I'm in, I'm loving this again. And then she brings the roses in, and she's only cut like this much from them, and they won't fit in the vase. And he says, "Oh, sweetheart, you cut them a bit too short." And I thought, "Oh, for God's sake, she can't like they've made her so like clumsy or distracted or so weak that she can't even cut flowers out of from a like." And I was like, "You're not giving her a chance. That's the problem here. They don't give her a fighting chance to."
Yeah.
If we as
She's a weak character.
we as screenwriters and filmmakers, we talk about our characters as if they're real people. We write them as if they're real people. And what does it say when you can't even allow your character to cut a bunch of flowers properly?
Yeah,
you know, it's probably not the first time she's done that. And I understand she's distracted. I understand there's anxiety. We're not talking about driving a car. We're not talking about going out on stage and trying to perform her best. We're not talking about doing something that might have been new or unfamiliar to her. We're talking about a little bit of gardening, a garden pruning that she's probably done a million times. That's probably second nature, you know. And they couldn't let her have that moment either, you know. And it annoyed me. It really annoyed me.
I was very frustrated by that. I think that she, as a character, you know, she starts off in such a weak position and she never really gets the boost up, you know, like in real life, a human might start in a weak position, but some way along the way, you know, especially if you then become a famous, you know, actress and you get to become all these different people, you're going to have high moments and low moments. And any good story has high moments and low moments. And there was no high and low. It was all just, oh, this is bad. Oh, we can breathe for a moment. And then it's bad again. And every time you think that she's getting a break, something even worse happens. And
structurally, though, you need that because, like I was talking about, Schindler's List has moments of humor in that. A movie about the Holocaust has moments of light humor in it because Spielberg knows you've got to give the audience some relief. And whether they stand the test of time or not is a different thing. But you know, there is a recognition that you cannot just bludgeon the audience over the head again and again and again. And Spielberg did say when he was making Schindler's List that he closed the iris, so to speak, on that film to just enough, like a pinhole view of the Holocaust, because he said anything more than that and the audience will not be able to stomach what they see. Like, we have to be very careful how we treat our audience, how we walk our audience through this landscape, because if we open the iris too wide, they will not sit through it. And
it's a wise man.
And I felt like Andrew Dominik didn't do that here. He could have had those shocking moments few and far between so that they are shocking. I didn't feel shocked. I just felt angry. Because I thought
I'm bored.
I'm bored, exactly. So boring.
Yeah, I was angry. I've never been as angry and as bored at the same time in my life.
Yeah.
I think,
and if we throw to, you know, you hear a lot about the fact that it's got a bit of horror genre. It's supposed to sort of, you know, give a nod to horror films and that kind of stuff in terms of, you know, and we feel that a little bit. But even in the worst horror film, there's always that moment where it starts off okay. You know, you have you start in a kind of a bunch of kids go on a camping trip and it's all fun for 5 minutes, but we got nothing of that with this. It was just terrible childhoods, terrible adulthood, terrible end of life, terrible. And I think that's why so many people struggle with it being so long, because it was so long anyway, but to have that linear and flat character structure, and actually the narrative arc wasn't much more, you know, exciting, particularly when we know so much of the story. So even though it's a reimagining, it still hit those key notes of the key things we all know: Joe DiMaggio marriage, Arthur Miller marriage, JFK incident. You know, like, it's like, okay, we knew that. So, you know, if you're going to reimagine, take us somewhere else. Take us somewhere we've never seen before that she went or did, you know. Give us something exciting, or give us a lift at some point so we can feel that light and shade of the sort of cinematic journey.
Do you feel that? Oh, sorry, Jenny, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that I was really intrigued by the moments of colour. So there's quite a lot of it in black and white, and then there's some bits of it that are in colour. And I think I was wondering what you guys thought about that, because I couldn't work out what the link was, and I don't know if that's just me being a bit like, you know, traumatized by the whole thing, or if it's just because, like, normally when you have something like that and there's a moment of color, it's like a positive moment. But I don't know, it was like there didn't seem to be a link in them.
And also the aspect ratio changing.
Yeah.
The only time I noticed the aspect ratio being used in a clever way, and I use that very lightly here, is during the JFK moment. And it was to hide, so that they didn't show too much, and it was very conveniently the aspect ratio changes size and so on, and then we zoom out and it's on the cinema screen and so on and so forth. And I just remember thinking, okay, that's one reason to do that in that moment. But I'm trying to think, why are you doing that in other scenes? Because and it's the same with the color. Yeah, I couldn't find a connection. I couldn't find a connection.
So I think it really had a feel like they were trying to portray different glimpses into different old movies. So it was like you had like types of horror films and types of film noir and a lot of kind of classic old movie scenes incorporated into the life of Marilyn, which would have worked well if they'd had a decent script with it, I think. But it just, like, I think it felt like, multiple old classic films being kind of rebrought to life and like used to emphasize Marilyn's life. But then I don't think any of the films that they were kind of giving a bit of a cheer up to were actually films that would have been accepted by current female audiences.
Yeah, like
and I don't know if they ever thought about that.
The scratch, when she scratches her own face, that's very sort of film noir-y, isn't it? And also, yeah, like Hitchcockian almost. One bit that I liked was when she was doing her first, I think it was her first film, when she was Nell, she had the razor blade and she'd obviously done a scratch, or, on her face, and she's holding the razor blade here. And later on, when we go and visit her mother in the mental institute, she's got a cut on her face in that same position. And I thought that was quite clever. But again, it's like it was there, but it wasn't like, it wasn't sort of emphasized enough in a way. I don't know if I
think that could have had a lot of weight to it. What we've always Hollywood historians have always considered to be one of the most beautiful women ever on the screen and so on. And to show an image of her cutting, her face or having a scratch mark or something, like, a blemish of some sort, being to this beautiful painting, so to speak, and suddenly that could be a very loud, powerful thing.
She scratched her face, and then the next scene you see her and there's nothing there, and I don't know if that's supposed to be like a time lapse thing, but it's not explored at all. And then apart from the only other slightly helpful character that she's got is her makeup artist. And even he's part of the system. He's trying to get her back on the stage. He's getting the doctor in. He's getting her injected. She's sort of, but she relies on him to put Marilyn on her. She relies on him to put her face on, and she's saying, "Oh, I don't want her to abandon me. Don't let her abandon me. Don't let her abandon me." And he's like, "She's coming. It's fine. She'll be here." And he's putting her makeup on, and it's like, and then there she is in the mirror, and I thought that was quite powerful.
Wouldn't it be lovely to explore why she doesn't want Marilyn to abandon her? Because I don't understand. Because in the film she is saying, like, I want to move away. I want to do this. I want to do that. Wouldn't it be like, I completely, I guess I'm watching this and thinking, why do you want Marilyn to come to you? Because look at what it does to you, and you're clearly not happy. So I love that idea that there's such an interesting question to explore within that moment that could have made for a whole 90-minute film in its own right.
Yeah, because it wasn't
like,
that
what,
long.
what about this person that feels like she wants this mask or this, this look, or
because it wasn't that long previously that she was saying to Arthur Miller, "Don't make me go back. Don't make me go back. I only just got out of my life last time." And obviously we know that she doesn't get out with her life, but then you don't really see Arthur Miller sort of forcing, he doesn't force her back into it, but then she ends up back there, and I can't remember why she.
But they do jump through. They do take shortcuts. They jump through time a lot, as you mentioned, and it just felt like you were more interested in getting to the beatings and the assaults rather than staying with the character. And the moments they do stay with the character, it's always in a very cruel way, or in I guess an attempt at eroticism or something like that, and it doesn't have the effect I think that they're trying to. A question for you guys, sorry. I've heard people say this is a horror, and everything we've described right now is clearly like, if you didn't know what we were talking about, you would think it's a horror. Is that a cop out though? Because I'm not convinced like that it's is it, like, in the sense of I think Fiona, you even mentioned slasher of sorts. Like, is it too easy to just label this as horror because of what's been presented, or is it more that we're like desperate to try and define what we've seen?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and I was wondering that because I did notice that the description of the book on which it's based does describe itself as a bit of a slasher, how it has these slash elements. Now, I haven't read it, and so I was wondering whether that was pulled through from that original novel. I don't know, but certainly for me, I get the idea of why, again, if someone's trying to put on a feminist hat about, well, you'd create this as a horror because it is a horror of an existence and an experience kind of thing, it's just very overt, if you like, and not at all nuanced. But I get it, but it didn't work for me as a technique because, as I said, as I use the word bludgeoned, and that's exactly how I felt, like emotionally bludgeoned all the way through. And the key issue was that it showed me nothing new. There was nothing new that I learned about her experience. I was just beaten over the head with what I already knew, and which was already terrible. And it's like, I don't need to know this again, So for me, it didn't work at all. But I don't know about the other guys, what you thought.
Well, actually, if it wanted to be a horror, it could be, but I think that they should have used that chance to reimagine a world where Marilyn lived and was the final girl. She could go through all of that awful stuff, and then if she lived at the end instead, then it would be something new that we hadn't seen before. It would, bring her up finally. But the fact that it's just all down, 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 it doesn't go anywhere. I don't think it's fair to even give it a genre. It doesn't have a structure. It doesn't have a character arc. Why give it a genre?
It's really interesting you say that, because I remember that there was, I watched a documentary about her years and years ago. I think it was years and years ago or something. And there was a woman interviewed who I think used to be a flatmate of Marilyn's before she became, or just as she was starting to get famous. And her perspective was that Marilyn Monroe, or Norma Jean, had used the casting couch very much to enhance her career. She kind of grabbed it and ran with it. And it wasn't that she was, well, this particular viewpoint was that she wasn't a victim, was that she actually was kind of in control of that, and she knew what she was doing and she played it. And I was thinking about that interview while I was watching this film and thought, now that I'd like to see. I'd be really interested in hearing a story about what if she did have more control over these things? What if she did know what she was doing in that casting couch stuff? Like, that's something different. So that would have been okay, but it was, it's just, I really was wanting that newness, which we just didn't get.
You can't imagine that someone who used their femininity as on the screen in the way that Marilyn Monroe did, or Norma Jean did, that she had no knowledge of how attractive and how beguiling she was. And I'm not saying that, I'm not even inferring at all that she had, that, horrible things didn't happen to her. But yes, to see her using her powerful femininity in that way might have been more empowering. However, possibly not, a feminist point of view, because you don't want young women to think that they have to use that to their advantage, and it's, I don't know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because
it is. So, pitch of screenwriters that you are there any redeeming features about this film?
I think if you cut it, like if you got rid of all of the sexual gratification and the kind of trauma fetishism, all of the traumatic-y scenes and the sex scenes, and just had the rest, I might consider watching it again.
Yeah. I did like it. I have to say, I did like it. There were bits that I thought were really good, and I think you'd have to cut a lot of it out. I really liked the bits where liked is a strong word, but I really thought that they were clever. Some of the bits where she was losing it, and where her mother, I hated the bit with the peril to children, because I just cannot, I just wanted to turn that off right at the beginning for that bit. But yeah, the bits where she was and it was all a bit, Mrs. Dalloway, is it the yellow wallpaper, that kind of what's real and what's not real, and the bit that was quite horror filmy, a bit sort of Blair Witch or whatever, where she was waking up and there were people in her room in the dark, and that was really scary, but an effective kind of freaky scene. And I really liked those bits, and I liked the bits where she came, that she was in the limousine, and all those people were shouting, but they were like, Marilyn, and then their faces just went all weird. And I think for me, to show her state of mind, if that would have been her state of mind, I would have liked to have seen more strength. But I think by some of those points, she was just, from that film at least, had just been it was just broken, wasn't she? And obviously those were in those kind of times, there were a lot of people in the industry and in other places taking a lot of drugs that were prescribed and unprescribed, and it was really common. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't like about it, was that it was her taking these drugs was shown as a really, it was almost like, oh, bad woman, you are taking these drugs. Whereas when you watch something like Walk the Line, Johnny Cash, he's taking the drugs, he's doing the drink, da 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 da. But then it's like, oh, it's okay, he's fixed himself and he's a bloke, so he's all right, So, I think there were good bits, and I think there was a lot that was troubling about it. And yeah, it would be interesting to re-edit it.
I think the really important point, actually, and you kind of touched on it with the Walk the Line, is, can you imagine them doing a reimagining of any dead famous man that portrays them in as bad a light, or portrays the whole of it in as bad a light as they have? I mean, they couldn't do it, I don't think.
Well, I agree, and I think one of the reasons why I think it's interesting that they could have done the as objective as one can, a biopic in the strict term of Marilyn Monroe. They could have added to the list. I think it's interesting that they chose the novel that is a self-confessed fictional imagining of her personal life. So there's no one alive to say that's not how it happened. She's not there to defend, and we've chosen scenes that are undocumented. We've chosen moments of her life that may not even have happened at all. She may have been away during that day in that calendar month, that's depicted in the film, but we're getting away, we've got ourselves this get out of jail free card, and that's allowed us to be able to do anything we want. But we do, and you've done all the things that we just described, and I think that's I think that speaks volumes about where the thesis of this story is, of what the thesis of this film is, which is it's not really about Marilyn, because it's totally made up. And most films are made up, but I didn't feel the Elvis biopic was entirely made up. I felt like I learned something about Elvis. I know nothing about Elvis, and I feel like I learned something about Elvis. I feel like I know which albums to go out and buy now,
And also with the Elvis thing, the Elvis story was a perspective of Elvis's relationship with his manager, which is something we didn't really know about, and we'd never had a chance to have a look at that. So that I thought it's a really good comparison between the two, because I think Lerman did a great job at giving us a different view of an equally iconic person, right?
And that is imagined as well,
yes,
no question. But at least it is built on a foundation of truth. I think the idea of I'm doing a biopic of how Fiona spent her Saturday, but Fiona can't tell me how she really spent her Saturday. So I get to write whatever I want now. And that's what's happened here. It's just, you've taken the most vague uninspiring parts of her life and decided to dig deep into that, where
Yeah,
there's
and I think,
you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
yeah, that whole taking ownership of, once again, of Marilyn Monroe, because we think that we're allowed to own her. You know, we stare at her on the screen. You know, people have got posters of her in their rooms. You know, like, and then taking ownership of her and just twisting it around and to your own. Like, why would you even? I mean, if you're going to make something up to that extent, why wouldn't you just make it up about, you know, a completely fictionalized character? And but the thing is, if they'd done that, would they be able to get away with that much gratuitous kind of, like,
No, it would be an art house film. That's how
yeah,
it would be viewed. But actually, no, just exactly to what you just said. Why aren't they making up positive things about her? Why aren't they making up how, like, that she's a good writer, or that she's a poet on the weekends, or that she loves to sing walking around the house, and that she just is able to bellow out and have this amazing voice, or like if you want to show us like that they're controlling her in the recording studio, like, no, you're doing it wrong, but like we see her when she's walking around the kitchen, then like blasting her lungs, and like there's so much positivity you could have injected into the film if you want to go down the road of fictional,
Yeah.
you know.
But
And
equally, even in real life, we know that she worked really hard at all those acting classes that she did. She was really involved in so much. She went to all those actor studios. She tried really hard. It was kind of well known that she really got stuck in, to the points that she could. And none of that came across. You didn't really get a sense that she had any sort of even ambition or any kind of sense of energy. It was just, and equally, like, can I just say, what would you have thought if Baz Luhrmann's film about Elvis had taken us for a trip through Elvis Presley's prostate, right?
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
would just be it would be laughed at, and it would be
It'd be
ridiculous.
laughable. Yeah,
yeah. I
exactly.
didn't like the bit when she was at the acting class and she just completely, she went into, like, she had a bit of a, like, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't understand that bit. She was she was having a memory, and then she was on the floor and like freaking out. And I think, well, that like you were saying, Fiona, she went to those acting classes and she worked hard, and she, you know, she did have, like John said, she did have comic timing, and she had, you know, all of this, like, all of the things that make her films beautiful and amazing. And that was just like, oh, she's just, you know, traumatized. She's just a traumatized woman. Oh.
It makes me a bit upset that like people that don't know Marilyn might watch it
Yeah,
and feel like it's more true than it
yeah,
is, and that's the worst thing about this film. I
yeah,
think is anyone who has never understood who Marilyn was to even a little degree could
Well,
see this film and potentially believe
yeah,
it, and that is the most upsetting
yeah,
thing about it.
yeah.
one of Andrew Dominik's traits as a filmmaker, and I do like Andrew Dominik as a filmmaker. I think he is a great filmmaker when he's in, like, when he's able to do very interesting things, and he does interesting things in this film. But I just think, yeah, as we've discussed, I think he missed a few marks here, obviously. But one of the things he does very interesting is his titles are very carefully chosen, and they're often based on titles from books that he's adapting. But one of the most interesting titles is the Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. If you've ever seen that film, it's about Robert Ford's obsession with Jesse James, becoming, never meet your hero, and then killing Jesse James, as the title suggests, right? But what's so interesting about that title is that that title gets abbreviated by everybody to the Assassination of Jesse James, and the film then gets framed in everybody's mind as a movie about Jesse James, and that's exactly the point of what Robert Ford went through, because Robert Ford was vilified for taking out this bad man, and Jesse James was so loved that when Robert Ford killed him to save himself and his brother, he became the villain. He became the guy that everybody then wanted to kill. And it's so interesting that even when they made a movie about Robert Ford and his exploits, it all got reframed as a movie about Jesse James, because the title was so long that they cut out Robert Ford's name out of it. Like, the driving action of that title is Robert Ford Assassin. It's the assassin Robert Ford is what the abbreviation should be. But it's not. It's the assassination of Jesse James that we're interested. And I think that's so brilliantly done. And again, to this film, they didn't call it Marilyn, they didn't call it whatever, they called it Blonde, because it's not about Marilyn in the same way the assassination of Jesse James has been taken away from Robert Ford. And in this instance, it's Marilyn Monroe is being removed from this as being the driving force of this movie, and instead she is being pushed through the movie by a bunch of angry men. Then, the agents or the directors or in the film itself, or the producers and so on, and the president of the United States. I mean, it's like she is the her identity is being removed, and the title of the film tells you that. What is the Marilyn Monroe film now that everybody's talking about? It's a film called Blonde, because that's how we view her,
And the Marilyn Monroe film that's out is actually essentially just about pretty blondes getting screwed over.
Again, it's the title speaking volumes about what the thesis of the film is.
I think that's true. I think that's what he was trying to do. He's trying to really, like I said earlier, he's really trying to make you see that she's an object and that she's been objectified. And that's why I think he thinks it's a feminist film, because he's really doing that. He's really trying to make people see that. But unfortunately, he's done it by completely objectifying her.
Yeah. I wonder what the book. I wonder what the relationship is from the book to the script.
Has anyone
because
read
I
the
feel
book?
like I haven't.
No.
But I think Andrew Dominik's a really good filmmaker. I think, and I even think this film has some really lovely bits of filmmaking in it. It's, you look at it and it's a lovely work of art. It's just the content is where I've got the problem. And I just was just thinking about it. I thought, well, how much then as him a writer is him pulling what's come from the source material versus,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so I've actually never seen anything else by Dominik. Has he ever done anything else with a female protagonist?
I don't think
where they are not being destroyed and weak and awful.
No, he hasn't done a lot of films. By the way, I just want to say he's done so Chopper, which was a massive Australian hit, wasn't it? And then Assassination of Jesse James was his first kind of big Hollywood outing. Killing Them Softly, then 2012, and then some more documentaries. He did 2 episodes of Mindhunter, which I never knew. I love that show. And then another documentary in Blonde. He doesn't do a lot of films. He's very particular about what he chooses, which again is very interesting. He could have picked anything. Like, for a guy who is so particular about the kind of films he makes, again, he's choosing this subject. So I'm very interested to get to know kind of what really kind of tickles his interest at its heart. But one thing we have to talk about is Ana de Armas. We haven't even mentioned her name yet, I don't think. Like, I think, give her the Oscar. It's the best performance by a woman, I think, in I can't remember how long, from a Hollywood American cinema perspective at the very least. I don't know. That's why I felt. How did you guys feel about it? I mean, she's Marilyn, right? I mean,
yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I think she was the jewel in the film for me, for sure. She just, for whatever she was given, I mean, she just brought it to life. It was absolutely, I think, an outstanding performance. So she should get the Oscar.
I think she was absolutely fabulous. I just wish that she'd been given different material to portray, because she was absolutely Marilyn. So much so that it hurt, because it was like seeing someone that you has inspired you all your life being pulled down again and again, and that's no fun.
I wonder, did they do some visual effects trick? I've seen a montage of her, or a time lapse of her on Instagram being, the makeup and the hair and so on being done and like turning into Marilyn, but it didn't seem like they did that much in terms of actually changing her facial structure, so to speak, prosthetics or anything.
They had a little, I think they had a little bit. I think she obviously had a wig thing, but I think there's a little bit around her forehead, because there was a couple of little bits in the beginning of the film where she was raising her eyebrows, and there was this little bit of her forehead that just wasn't. But then maybe that's just her forehead. Maybe that's just how her face looks. I don't know. I don't want to be too critical.
But it was uncanny. There were moments where I was like, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Like, it did feel. There's a moment in Elvis where they very cleverly cut between real Elvis and Austin Taylor. Is that his name?
Yeah.
And and there are moments where you can see they've done a face transplant onto some archive footage, just very, very subtly. And it's just all cleverly edited to the point where it all just, it's like that, the bird in the cage. And if you flip it enough, it looks like a bird in a cage. And to me, it didn't need that. This film didn't need those tricks, those editing tricks. There were moments where I was like, is this her? Like, are they doing some CGI here? Like, this is so weird. It's so incredibly captivating. Is the only word I can describe. Like, I'm literally just, I have to keep watching because I feel like I'm privy to something here that we might never see again. That kind of thing.
I wish that we could write a new version. Like a new version that she can do, where we reimagine her to, I don't know, be a superhero.
Where's your next film, Eva? Off you go.
Our next film, guys. We've got to talk Anna into it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So just in wrapping up then, John, with all the history of the script department, has there ever been a film that has been so unilaterally disliked from the discussion?
Well, Brad and I did a talk about the Eternals once, and the recording got damaged because it went on so long, I think, or something. I don't know. But it never made it to air, actually, because it was it was actually, the recording didn't record properly, but thank God it didn't, because I don't think Marvel would have hired us. It was, this is, but what's interesting? This is not out of the ordinary, this conversation we're having. This is how... There's so many people that I've spoken to. People have either tiptoed around it and said, it's a horror film and it's a very beautifully shot horror film, and nobody's talking about the content itself. They're just really talking about how deeply disturbing it is and how tough it is to watch sometimes. But it's a beautiful film, and it's they're very carefully choosing their language so they don't burn any bridges. But anybody else I talk to just simply says, "Yeah, I had to turn it off," and I think. You can certainly find the cinematic merit in it. It'll win the Oscar for Best Editing, I have no doubt. You asked, what are the merits of this? The performance of a lifetime from Ana de Armas. People will be teaching that performance for years, I imagine. Maybe the film that might win Best Picture for Netflix, but I don't think it will, because I think as it gets some more time to breathe, I think people are going to slowly kind of move away from it. I can't imagine this is going to be on anybody's favorite movies list. I think it'll be on people's lists of like top film events of the year, or things like that. I think it'll definitely on critics' lists of experiences of the year kind of thing. But I can't imagine this is watch again on the Netflix tab. For many people.
Would any of you watch it again?
No.
And I love 1940s, 1950s set pieces. I love hanging out in LA in the 50s in movies and TV. I love that kind of stuff. And I was so excited for this. And one last thing. Sorry, Fiona, to hijack this, but do you think this was shot? Do you think it was made a certain way because of COVID? Because at a certain point I was watching this and thinking, this feels like it's very like there aren't a lot of people in any one room. Anytime there's large numbers of people, it always feels like maybe there's an element of compositing or something going on. I was wondering actually for a moment, is this a COVID movie? In the sense of like, all right, we can't have that many people in a room. We're going to stick to interiors as much as possible, or isolated venues like a beach house or a beach. She's not walking down Sunset Boulevard, is she? Or anything like
right. I think I read somewhere about it being filmed.
They started filming in 2019 and they had to pause, and they finished in, I think it said they finished in 2020 or 2021, July 21 or something like that. So it's definitely was filmed during that COVID period. I hadn't really thought about that at all, actually, when I was watching it, but it adds to that kind of like intensity, doesn't it? And the vulnerable one-on-one, you get, there's so many shots of her face, and like when her lipstick's all, squiffy, and there's quite a lot of intense sort of moments like that, isn't there, where it's just a couple of people in a room.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been divisive, hasn't it, as a film? It's certainly got people talking. which I'm sure is what Netflix is happy about. But you know, what did Oscar Wilde say? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about, or something. I don't know. But yeah, something like that. Anyway, on that note, we should probably wrap up. But thank you, everybody, for your fantastic insight and your really interesting conversation. I'll be really interested to hear how people who watch this podcast, what they think of it. Yeah, I think that's it. Anything else? Do I need to wrap up with anything, John? I've just completely...
You can buy us all a coffee, guys.
Yes, buy us a coffee. That would be really
Links
great.
in the description. Hit us up on social media and all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
I think next time we're going to talk about next one for the women in screenwriting is Moxie. We're going to be having a look at Moxie next week, I think. So yeah, look out for that one. Right. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next time. Bye.